We have long established that Tuesdays are the best days of the week. I believe we established that back in May, right, when we went on the air? And here we are.
Yeah, Tuesdays are the best. Some Tuesdays are even bigger days than other for you and me.
Right.
When they're chock full of fun sports things that we get to talk about and other things. So this is one of those Tuesdays.
Today is it's one of those days. It's like a holiday for some because it's loaded, but for us it's a
busy day.
It's a triple header. So for the first time in the history of this show, we are not live tonight on our live stream because you and I at this moment are up in Salt Lake getting ready to call the BYU Westminster basketball game live on BYU TV. You can't be two places at once.
Right. We're sitting in Vivint Arena right now. but we're sitting here right now earlier so that you guys can watch us right now.
Because there's so much going on and so much to talk about, especially related to the last weekend and the coaching changes and the things that are ahead. So we invite you to hang with us. You can also put the basketball game on your other mobile device, and you can see us there and you can see us here. Again, this is for the live stream tonight, and it makes it a Super Tuesday. So here we go. Wise Guys, Dave McCann, Blaine Fowler. Man, there's a lot going on campus. Let's jump right into our kind of our teasers for the show. First of all, Blaine, BYU makes coaching changes on defense. Elisa Tuiaki steps down as the defensive coordinator. We anticipate there will be other movements as well. We'll discuss what happens next.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. We won't get into it right now because that's why we call it a tease. Because we're just telling you what we're going to talk about in the course of this show. But, yeah, there's a lot of dominoes that are going to fall as this progresses down that pathway right now. What we know is that Elisa Tuiaki announced that he was stepping down. My feeling is that Kalani had talked to him about it, and Elisa thought, I'm going to just get out in front of it, let some of these young guys prove their worth here between now and the bowl game, and not wait to the bowl game to make the announcement. Yeah. So he went ahead and on social media let it out there. So we'll talk about what happens as a result of that, and maybe some of these other things that'll go on down the road. Hey, how about the Cougars run over Stanford? When I say run over Stanford, I use that word because one of the great rushing performances in the history of BYU is they dominated the line of scrimmage in the regular season final. Impressive win, 35-26 over Stanford, over in Palo Alto, where BYU's fans took the stadium over as we expected.
It was glorious. Practice resumes. Now they're waiting for their bowl game. We're going to look at some of the possibilities. December 17th appears to be the target day, but there's a few other games around that'd like to get it in before Christmas. When you're not in the mega bowls, next year it'll be a whole different bowl scenario. You know, the Big 12 bowls are all after Christmas, closer to New Year's. Yeah. And this year not the case, but it's the last blast of independence.
Well, and we know that Kalani and the players and the coaches, they love all these extra practices, so they absolutely, regardless of what bowl, that's the most valuable part of it, is that you get these extra 15 practices. Their wish is to play before Christmas. That's why we're saying targeting the 17th, because there's several possibilities there. Unfortunately, when you're in BYU's position and you're not in a conference until next year, sometimes your wish doesn't come true. There's also a couple there's one on the 27th that they've been listed on in several publications, and we'll come back and talk about that. We know what BYU wants. Yeah. They want a before Christmas, good opponent, nice location place.
Preferably warm.
Yeah, and so there's a good chance that happens, but there's still a chance that it could be as late as the 27th. So we'll talk about that in just a bit. So, hey, how about BYU basketball? They're taking over Salt Lake City this whole week. Yeah. And that's because Christmas Around the World has taken over the Marriott Center, which is a great – if you haven't seen Christmas Around the World, which I have, it's awesome. It'll get you in the Christmas spirit in a heartbeat.
But you can't have that show and play basketball.
No, because it's a big, huge setup. They take over the Marriott Center. So BYU's going to take over Salt Lake City, 2 games this week at Vivint. You and I will be up there for both.
Sweet, because the Christmas lights are on. There's a new coating of snow all over Utah today and
so
through the week.
And Salt Lake City, by the way, I was in Salt Lake City last night. It took me an hour and 20 minutes to get from 123rd South to Lehigh High School.
I saw the pictures
to watch a
of
basketball
it. Oh,
game.
my gosh.
It was a blizzard, sideways snow on Point of the Mountain, like the old days.
Like the old days.
So Salt Lake City is blanketed in white. Provo is too, just not quite as much. So it's fun, and it's going to be fun. Tonight is the first of that. Saturday's the other. We'll talk a little bit more and give you specifics around where to watch the game and what time.
Women's hoops hits the road for Boise State and Utah State. And then the women's volleyball team, they find out who they're playing in this week's NCAA tournament, and we'll roll that out for you as well. Let's jump into the headlines, and the biggest of all headlines is the Big 12 football schedule, which we anticipate will be Thursday. Tom Holmoe said December 1st in our interview with him 2 weeks ago, which was our only indicator of a date that anybody's heard. He said, well, we got to be ready for December 1st. So that's when he said, I know who we're playing at home, and I know who we're playing on the road. We just don't have the dates all finalized.
He didn't know.
And then he dropped December 1st on us.
They have computer programs that, he knows who their home opponents and away opponents, as you mentioned, but he indicated to you that he didn't yet know. The computer sticks it in there and makes sure it all works out of when they're going to have a bye and what weeks they're going to play who, and whether they have back-to-back homes or home and away and home and away. So he mentioned that December 1st was the target.
And that's Thursday.
Was the target to have all that figured out and make an announcement, which is going to be really cool.
So we expect a 9-game slate of conference games, which is interesting because there's either going to be 5 at home or 5 on the road. BYU already has 2 home games scheduled. So if they get 5 conference games, that gives them 7 home games.
Right.
They haven't had 7 home games with the exception of 2020 and 1996 because it's expensive to the season ticket holder.
Right. But it's when they play at home, that's revenue. Obviously, every time they play a home game, there's a lot of revenue that comes with that for the program, plus the additional TV revenue that's coming. Next year could be a positive year for the finances of the program.
It's interesting, though. They stay away from, like Notre Dame will play 7, 8. Some of those schools, Nebraska, will play as many as they can. But for our fan base, when you go 7 home games and you've got a family of 4 or 5 with season tickets, now that's all of a sudden that's another $1,000.
Right.
And that I think they've tried to stay away from that. But here's what I like. I like if you get 7 home games, you move 1 to Vegas. You don't count it in the season home ticket package.
And the Vegas fans will pick those tickets up like that.
Absolutely. And then you got a Vegas game and 6 home games. I like that. I like that. We'll see.
It's
we'll have a feeling.
And BYU does play on the road next year at Arkansas.
Yeah.
And so that's one of their road non-conference games is set, and that's Arkansas.
So if they play 5 road games in the Big 12, that's 6 P5 road games next year, which has never happened ever.
That's plenty for anybody, right?
And then it would give them 5 conference games at home and then the 2 Sam Houston and Southern Utah to warm whoever's quarterback.
That Arkansas team, we saw them up close and personal. They're young. They're really talented and young. And so that's going to be quite the challenge. But how fun is that to go play in SEC country on the road? If I'm a player, I'm loving that. But you're right. That's 6 road games against P5s. And then at least 5 home games against P5s at home, right? So,
hey, the more football
or would it be 4? Could there be 4 home? No, I think it's 5.
You got to play 9.
Yeah.
So you can't play 6 road games, right? I think it'll be 4 and 5.
Yeah.
One way or the other.
Yeah, one way or the other.
5 gives you 7 home games.
Right.
5 road games gives you 6 P5s on the road. So we're anticipating Thursday. If it's not Thursday, the world's not going to end. But we circled Thursday after Tom circled Thursday.
And we're hoping it's Thursday because if they announce it, like say later in the day Thursday, then you and I are co-hosting Sports Nation on Friday.
Right.
And we'll be glad to fill you in on every game and where it is and when. And if it's not that, say they do it Friday afternoon, well, we'll put a graphic together. We'll have it in our game at Vivint on Saturday.
You and I have not hosted a Sports Nation since the day after the Miami Beach Bowl game. What year was that?
We alternate in, but we go with Jeremy and Spencer or Jason, and you and I kind of alternate in. But
so Junior called and said, "Hey, I got you and Blaine, or Ben wants you and Blaine on Friday together." And I texted back, "Sometimes you got to give the people what they want."
Exactly. Well,
so we're going to do that
and
Friday.
And the timing, if indeed this announcement comes out on Thursday or early Friday, wouldn't that be nice for us to be able to go through that schedule? So keep your eyes and ears open. We'll tweet some things out.
We might even pop in on here. We might even pop here.
We might do a little live stream here before we go on with that. So keep if you're subscribed, you'll get an email and highlights of the show. But we can also push emails to you or notices to you that something's up. So if we get the announcement, we're going to do a little live stream, and you're subscribed to us at ysguys.com. You'll get a heads up. And you'll be able to join us for that. So
and go to YouTube and hit subscribe. It's free. Go to Twitch. You can follow us for free there. Click on the chat button in the lower right part of the screen. Sign up, follow us, and go to ysguys.com.
There's a lot
subscribe.
of news. A lot of news this week, and here's the other thing: if more news comes out on coaching staff and those kinds of things this week, we're also going to cover all that. So there's a lot of news coming this week. If you want to be in the middle of that, I think your best bet is to subscribe at ysguys.com, because then you're going to get pushed an email with some news about tuning in.
So speaking of things, I was on Twitter today, and I see that Liberty coach Hugh Freeze is going to Auburn.
Yep.
Be the head coach there. And I also saw a tweet from Jacob Conover, BYU's backup quarterback.
Yeah.
And it was kind of like a cryptic thing about, hey, because he drives this van and,
he has a minivan.
And it doesn't drive great in the snow, and then he says, I think it's time for me to move on and put some eyeballs there. Now, I read right through that tells me that he's going into the transfer portal without any other knowledge.
If you say, looks like it's time for me to get a different car if I'm going to be here in Utah.
With some eyeballs.
He didn't say that. He says time for me to move on.
Maybe it's time for me to move on. Move on from the van, move on from BYU. Here's what we know. The portal season is here. And
hey, if anybody has a 4-wheel drive for Jacob, we can help a brother out, okay?
He's a redshirt freshman quarterback, came in highly touted, came into the game the other night against Stanford, and they ran 10 straight times because Stanford couldn't tackle. They ran a pass play. The screenplay wasn't there, so we threw it in the ground. But we have seen so little of him during the season, even when Jaron Hall was injured, that many speculate, the future just may not be there for Conover at quarterback at BYU. And some will go, what? Are you kidding me? Alabama wanted him years ago. We're not at practice, and for whatever reason, he just hasn't gotten on the field. And we haven't had blowouts this year where you would be able to, but there have been opportunities where Aaron Roderick has said, I'm going to go with a quarterback who's not necessarily healthy, but still my best option.
And here's my and this is way reading through the lines, but
yeah,
if Baylor Romney is the backup quarterback, who everyone on the team trusted implicitly for the last couple of years, and Jaron had a little bit of a shoulder problem, my bet is he would have sat down for a game or two and got healthy, because they felt like Baylor can run this offense as good as anybody, as good as Jaron, really. Run the offense as good as Jaron. Maybe not run around like Jaron and be as dynamic as Jaron, but in terms of being able to run the whole offense, everyone on that coaching staff felt like he's got as good a grasp as anybody, and he's got a great deep. And so Jacob hasn't played, so there wasn't that huge confidence level. The schedule was crazy tough, right? It was right during a difficult part of the schedule, and they felt better about going with an injured Jaron than going with Jacob. So obviously they're telling you know what, he's, if Jaron's at 85%, we're going to go there. That tells a little bit. And in today's college football, it just seems like transfer mania.
It is transfer mania.
So what happens is, if you got a big-time guy and you have a younger guy that hasn't played a bunch, then all of a sudden you feel like, we got to go find who's in the transfer portal that played, that maybe got hurt and then got their job taken.
Especially when you're going into a Power 5 conference.
Right, or say there's an FCS guy that was under-recruited, that's been starting for 2 years and thrown for 4,000 yards. I mean, look at what Washington State did this last year.
Yep.
Washington State went and got a guy that was from a tiny school in Texas that nobody recruited, but all he did, he went out at FCS and threw for 4,000-plus yards and 40-something touchdowns. And they're like, yeah, that guy was not that guy can play right now. He transfers and he starts at Washington State right now. And so it seems like that's the direction people are going. They go with a somewhat proven commodity, unless somebody comes in out of high school and they just light it up, and then that's your guy and you play that guy. You've always got an eye on the transfer portal. That's just the nature of college football today.
In the woulda, coulda, shouldas, to read down deeper into the between the lines, had Jackson Dart decided that he could wait behind Jaron Hall
for 1 year,
instead of have to play right now, he'd have played half the season.
Yeah.
In theory, he would have played half the season, and
he has 2 years left,
and may not have lost the job. Right. The opportunity was there, and then he goes into the Big 12 as BYU's quarterback with experience at BYU. But as the scenario you just pointed out, which we see over and over again, is kids go, what? I don't want to sit.
Who's guaranteeing
And Ole
me?
Miss is like, you'll start right now.
Right.
And
the difference between BYU and Ole Miss was BYU said, we have what we think is an NFL draft pick at quarterback for at least one more year. We don't know how long he's going to be here, but you're in our long-term plans. And Ole Miss is going, no, dude, come here. You're our starter.
You're in our plan right now.
Do you know when you're the starter? As soon as you walk down the stairs of the airplane. Do airplanes still have stairs anymore?
I think so.
In Mississippi, they do. In Mississippi, they do.
They do.
Or as soon as you walk into if you go to a major airport, as soon as you walk down what is that thing called? The gate.
The taxiway or the gate?
I don't know what it's called. Whatever that thing is called. But
so but again, it doesn't really matter. But the opportunity was, if I go to BYU, I don't want to wait, but I guess I could. And then all of a sudden, voila, you're starting. You're starting October. You're playing against Notre Dame. You're playing against Arkansas. And then all of a sudden things change. But kids don't want to wait.
No, the perfect example is Daniels from USC from a couple years ago.
Yeah.
He was the starter. He got nicked up. They replaced him. The other guy won the job, so he transfers to Georgia. He gets beat out by a walk-on, who Stetson Bennett, who's phenomenal and wins a national champ. Then he transfers, and I think he was the starter at West Virginia this year. I can't even remember where he is now.
Yeah, I'm not sure where he is either, but he's somewhere else.
And so it's just like, wait a minute, I'm not the guy. I'll just go someplace else. Yeah. And they get one free transfer, right? So you get one transfer,
and that's what's
penalty.
jacked everything up.
That's what's messed up the whole world.
It used to be if you were leaving, you were sitting out a year,
right?
Now you're leaving, and you're Ole Miss's starter the day you.
Well, and Jackson Dart started a bunch of games for USC, but Lincoln Riley got the job at SC and immediately announced that Caleb Williams, his starting quarterback and Heisman Trophy candidate from Oklahoma, along with a couple receivers, were transferring with him. And Jackson's going, they're bringing this brand new offense that this guy's been running for him.
I'm out.
There's no way I'm going to get the job, so I'm out. And he left. And that's a part of college football that 10 years ago was not something that you dealt with. No. And so when we say, BYU, they've got Jake, they got Cade in the program. They like both of them, but they're not just going to go, let's hope we can develop those two guys. That's not how college football works anymore. They're going to go, if Jaron goes out, which we all think he likely will,
right.
They've had an eye on that transfer portal for a while. You've got to get an insurance policy.
And the outside quarterbacks looking for better opportunities also know there's going to be an opening here.
Right.
And so it's a two-way. The coach doesn't have to be the only one doing the calls, right? He can take calls. And
here's the difference. I don't know that BYU is going to go out and say to anybody, unless it's like high level. Maybe the Michigan kid that got hurt, who was their starter and really good.
McNamara.
Yeah, but outside of somebody like that, I don't think BYU's going to pull an Ole Miss. I don't think they're going to go
just say, you're our guy.
You're the guy as soon as you get off the plane.
Yeah.
They're going to say, boy, we think you fit into our plans. You'd have the inside track, but you're going to have to compete for the job. I just think that's the nature of how Kalani and Aaron do things. I don't think they're just handed to somebody.
So it's all about the future being Thursday again when we anticipate the Big 12 Conference football schedule announced. And again, if it's not Thursday, it might be Friday, it might be into the next week, but it is coming in December. We think it's December 1. The coaching changes, the Tuiaki change, and those that are going to follow, and then the hires and the portals and the new schedules and a bowl game in there, and suddenly there's no off season.
There's never an off season.
We got more to talk about this off season than we've had to talk about in the season.
Because we'll be talking about coaching changes, we'll be talking about transfer portal guys. We'll be talking about position races that are going on in January, February, and March, and off-season workouts and spring ball.
It's going to be a good time. That's why the Wise Guys is here. That's why we went on in May. We got a whole year and a half before the first Big 12 game to talk about it all and kind of bring our alumni base together.
And then we'll have basketball all through the winter to talk about, and a really young team. And I'm certain we'll be talking about new folks to bring into the Big 12 fold that Mark Pope's, to add pieces to that puzzle. I love his young group.
Yeah.
They're a little erratic right now, but But I love the talent there, and they're going to be good. And Mark Pope's going to add another transfer piece or two. So it's going to be
three or four.
It'll be really interesting.
So good times ahead. BYU football 7-5. We all feel better about that.
Yes.
Beat Stanford 35-26. It wasn't as close as the score indicated, although there's some moments in the second half. But through the first three quarters, BYU destroyed the Cardinal at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, and on both sides of the ball, they look really good. They came out and just shut Stanford down in that first half. The way we'd hoped they would play defense. And by the way, since Kalani's taken over 3 weeks ago, they've gotten progressively better every game. And don't look past in any way, shape, or form that Boise State game and how that team performed. Boise State was really, really high-level football going into that game. BYU dominated them, and they've been really high-level football since then.
Yeah.
And they're likely going to win the Mountain West Conference. And there was an outside chance they were going to go to a New Year's Six Bowl still. I think that's to this day BYU's best win. You can go back to Baylor, but when the season's all wrapped up and said and done, their best win. Boise State may be the best team that BYU beat all year
on the road,
especially under the circumstances where they've been losing, had that losing streak going in, had really been struggling. To turn that around around that level of a team was phenomenal, and it carried over to Utah Tech. They were really good with their assignments on both sides of the ball there. And then to Stanford, they did a great job. Had a couple of broken coverages that are going to drive the coaches nuts again in the Stanford game. But by and large, the thing that we've been complaining about, the BYU hadn't been able to do up to the Boise State game, was get their run fits right and stop the other team from running the football. And in Stanford, we talk about BYU having 358 yards of rushing. Stanford had 53. They couldn't run the ball. Now, I know they have had running back issues, right, but they got a big physical offensive line. And when we watched, and we'll talk, we talked about it on AFR today, BYU's run fits have been really good 3 straight weeks in a row. And BYU's down 4 linebackers, but they just executed. And they're going to get better next year in the secondary. They got a bunch of young corners. They're going to move some guys to safety. I think they're going to be even better in the secondary next year. With Kalani running that defense the way he has the last 3 weeks, it's been a little more simplified from a scheme perspective. The guys seem to be more aggressive, knowing where they're supposed to be. And even though they gave up some in the pass game, and hey, Tanner McKee's an NFL quarterback. Yeah,
it's good arm. I was glad to see him play well. 2 return missionary quarterbacks head to head.
He's going to complete some balls. He'll complete some balls against everybody. Yeah. I just love the way they shut the run down. And how about Chris Brooks the last couple of weeks? It's like somebody lit a fire under him and said, you need to run like you're upset.
He was upset. He ran 23 times. He was mad all 23, 164 yards. He has big games against Stanford. As a former Cal guy, you have to have games against Stanford. And so he goes in there from the very first carry. It's just like, you know what I'm doing? I'm running right through you, over and over and over and over. Jaron Hall only threw 11 passes in a game where BYU scored 35 points and dominated in total offense. 7 of 11, 2 of those 7 touchdowns. Then he ran a touchdown. Yeah, he sprained his ankle in the third quarter.
Part of the
it was huge. Yeah. Now about that ankle, what do we know?
High ankle sprain, which is very typical when you kind of get rolled on. Everybody saw in the game how he got kind of rolled on. Good news is he's got like 3 weeks, and he was walking around on it after the game. It wasn't like, hey, we got to get him on crutches and a boot. It's so serious because we've seen sprained ankles that serious. So my guess is he'll be okay to go for the bowl game.
And I feel like this bowl game, BYU's not going to take off. Like last year.
No, they need a launching pad into next year, and I think everybody knows that. And Jaron played hurt for 4 games,
right?
With not separated, but an injured shoulder, right? Yeah. And so he played through pain to prove to NFL scouts, I'm not just going to take games off if I'm going to play hurt. And you have to in the NFL. Everybody's playing hurt. You do in college football too. There's a difference between being hurt and being injured. Like when I say you're injured, you've got something that can be aggravated or worse if you get out and play on it. People play bumped up, bruised up, hurt. As long as they can't injure it further, they do. He did that. And he went out and in pain threw the ball, took a little bit of velocity off the ball. But I got to give him a lot of credit for fighting through that. I don't think this is going to be any different. Like, I think he's going to go, yeah, and I already committed that I'm going to play in this bowl game. And unless this ankle is truly injured and I'm going to hurt it worse, I'm going to take that thing up and go out and play. That's been his mentality. I have a lot of respect for that.
And I'm going to hand it to Chris Brooks. He's going to run angry.
Yes, he is.
And Puka Nakua is going to run some jet sweeps. And then when I do throw, my tight end is going to be wide open, run for a 43-yard touchdown like the other night.
And it was so nice to see Isaac Rex get so much more involved, the tight end involved and even though he didn't throw that many, he was a big-time target in this game.
Yeah, he's getting healthier. He's going to be a beast next fall.
And BYU, no penalties.
Think about that one for a minute.
That doesn't happen in college football.
It hasn't happened at BYU in 5 decades.
And here's the funny thing. When we were doing the scouting report last week on AFR, you and I and Dave Nixon, we talked about the fact that Stanford was, even though they had a bunch of injuries, they were one of the most disciplined football teams in all of America, right? That they didn't get penalized, and that was a big advantage for them. And then BYU goes out and doesn't get a single penalty. How about that?
That hasn't happened since Lavelle's first year. I wrote an article about it in the Deseret News yesterday. Kind of a posthumous gift from the Cougars in the 50th anniversary of the first season that Lavelle was hired. In the final game of that regular season, they go out there and they play a clean game, and Lavelle coached a clean game, and that's why everyone loved him all around college football. But I went back there and I go, what else was going on in 1972? The median price of a new home was $30,000.
Oh, my goodness.
It's hardly a down payment
You know what?
anymore.
My parents told me that the house that I grew up in New York, this is in New York too, that their house payment was $75 a month, and that included taxes and insurance.
I think the boyhood home.
Those were the days.
The boyhood home I grew up in, where my mom still lives, was $17,000.
Isn't that like 30,000 median 72? That doesn't seem that long ago because you and I were alive then.
Yeah,
you were barely. I was 9.
You were a little bit. Gallon of gas, 36 cents. The last time BYU played a football game without a penalty.
A gallon of milk, $1.20. Here's the interesting: milk has not gone up as much as gas or anything else. Why was milk so expensive back then? You know,
was there a cow shortage? Do we have more cows?
Maybe we got more cows.
The Big Mac sandwich was 65 cents,
and I loved me a Big Mac in 72.
Now they're $3.99, and they're so much smaller.
So I have to tell you, I hadn't had a Big Mac. And I don't know how many. It's been years, right?
Yeah.
And you and I sometimes on a basketball day we'll go do the shoot arounds and we run down to McDonald's and we just grab. And I always kind of get a double cheese, you know. But about 3 weeks ago, I wasn't feeling that great, and I got hungry. And I drove down through the drive-thru, and I just thought to myself, I haven't had a Big Mac in 10 years, and I got one. I forgot how good a Big Mac is.
Yeah.
That's a great sandwich.
I order it without pickles so that they have to somewhat cook it fresh, and then it's delicious.
But is it me, or have the burgers on the Big Mac gradually gotten
They've gotten smaller as the price has gone up.
Yeah, that's the only my only complaint was I just needed a little more meat on
They should rename it like the Little Mac or a remnant of the Mac.
Remember the Wendy's commercial? Where's the beef? That's where that comes from, is that the beef has shrunken.
But it's still pretty good.
Shrunken a word?
It is today.
Okay.
And the right time, a Big Mac's delicious. And some people are like, I can't believe you grown men would eat a Big Mac. It's like, yeah, with some fries and a Coke.
People need to stop dissing McDonald's because you and I like it, and it's a good place.
So Lavelle hired as head coach 1972. Again, the last time BYU went penalty-free. So they finished the regular season 7-5, and they go 6-1 against the Pac-12 over the last 2 seasons. Yeah. And they beat the best of the Pac-12 with the exception of Oregon.
And now they have, because Stanford was the lone wolf, they've beaten every Pac-12 team over the course of the last however many years.
Yeah.
Interesting, they had only played Stanford twice historically, but they were 0-2. Every other program in the Pac-12, BYU has a victory against, except for Stanford, and now BYU. Not only do they dominate that league the last 2 years, but they have a win against every team in the Pac-12.
So the bowl announcement we anticipate on Sunday, if not sooner, after the college football playoff bracket is announced, and then all the trickle downs of where everybody's going is put in place. ESPN has 16 bowls, and they're contracted to put BYU into one of them. And as we mentioned a short time ago, we anticipate it to be before Christmas.
And it's because I think BYU's let it be known, hey, if you're not in a New Year's Six bowl or in the college football playoff, you love having the extra practices, but you just as soon be done for Christmas so that the players and the coaches can all be home with family for Christmas rather than go over Christmas. But sometimes you don't get your wish.
Yeah, and we'll see. But
we've seen multiple. We've seen Frisco Bowl, which is before Christmas. We've seen New Mexico Bowl.
The Mexico Bowl would be prime time, December 17th on ABC. Yep. Never mind, it's in New Mexico. You have to block that out because there shouldn't be a bowl game in New Mexico.
I used to do a lot of basketball games down in the pit in the olden days, and you know what? Brenda and I would just hop in the car. She'd come down with me sometimes when I had a game in Albuquerque, and we'd drive the short drive up the road to Santa Fe. And Santa Fe at Christmas time, because I've had a game right at Christmas time, is beautiful. So don't knock it. Go down, take a drive to Santa Fe, take in the Christmas lights and the great culture and the art in Santa Fe, and then come back down and watch your team and then go home.
Nevertheless,
it's not the greatest spot.
It's not the greatest spot. But I'm just looking at TV opportunity, ABC, and maybe they'll give you a decent opponent. But then we've heard the wide range of various teams.
I've heard the couple that are interesting to me just because I think it would be an interesting matchup. And more than one publication has listed these two. The First Responder Bowl, which is down in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, that's after Christmas. It's the 27th. The thing that I like about it, it's Kansas they're talking about the matchup with.
I'd love that.
So the matchup is what I would like in that one.
A Big 12 preview.
Yeah, and I think that'd be fun. And Kansas is really good offensively, not so great defensively. It would be a really fun matchup, and it would be a future Big 12
That would be my preferred of all of them because of that opponent.
It's P5, P5, which is the only one that I've been looking at that's P5, P5. So there's a couple. I love that for the matchup. And you know what, Dallas-Fort Worth area, there's lots to do down there. And so I think it would be good. The other one is the Armed Forces. But now that First Responder Bowl, I think it's an SMU's stadium in Highland Park area, which is kind of northwest Dallas. Yeah. And that's a beautiful bowl stadium, all chairs that they built on campus, so SMU didn't have to go over and play in the Cotton Bowl. And when 25,000 people show up, look like the place is empty. Exactly. You can hear echoes. And so I think it's a 30,000-ish seat, really nice stadium there. The Armed Forces Bowl is at TCU's home stadium, so that's a place that BYU is going to play a lot in the next several years. And that's the 22nd, so it's before Christmas. The only problem is they're talking about Air Force as the opponent for that.
Yeah, I don't love that.
No, I don't think anybody loves that because of the brand of offense they play.
So we'll see. But it's going to be one of those, and you've got to. I think you've got to look at it as a celebration game, a celebration of the independence, kind of like the Utah Tech game. It's like, well, it's Utah Tech, so what? But Utah Tech happened to be the last home game of independence over 12 years, and the launch into the Big 12, and then all of a sudden you're like, all right, this is what this is. It's never going to be like this again, so I can embrace it, enjoy it for what it is.
The one publication listed the Independence Bowl again. And you know what? I just hope that ESPN, because why send them to the same bowl, back to back? And I just... So I'm hoping not that one. One publication listed that. I'd much rather have the Frisco Bowl or the New Mexico Bowl or the First Responder Bowl or the Armed Forces Bowl. Any of those would. There's good about any of those.
Next year at this time we'll be talking about
the Big 12's lineup of bowls.
Alamo Bowl
is a whole different scenario.
Just right on down the list against. Well, that's the SEC opponent. That's a Pac-12 opponent.
You just need to
Big
finish
10.
in the top half of the Big 12, and you've got a much better bowl.
Yeah. Which would be a challenge, but the bowls, if you got the worst bowl of the Big 12, it would be so much better than the best bowl that BYU's going to get.
Because they're just slotting them into,
So better days are ahead, but we'll keep you posted on the bowl situation. Let's go back to the coaching move with Elisa Tuiaki for a moment. Defensive coordinator announced on Sunday via social media that he was going to step down and leave the program, won't coach in the bowl game. Gives him plenty of time to find a new job and BYU time to find his replacement. And I was on Sports Nation yesterday and we were talking about it. And there's when a coach is dismissed or decides to leave or whatever, everything focuses in the negative of, we couldn't stop Arkansas, we couldn't blah 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 blah, and this is why this is a good move. But then if you're going to do that, as I mentioned yesterday, you've also got to bring in the fact that BYU was 28-9 over the last 3 seasons. Elisa Tuiaki was 28-9.
Right.
Jaron Hall was 6-1 against the Pac-12. Tuiaki was 6-1 against the Pac-12. You got to throw those numbers in too.
He was 11-1, or was it 11-1 2 years ago? They were 10-3 last year, or were they 12-1 2?
11-1 in the COVID year.
Right, and then
10-3
last year. Yeah, he was the defensive coordinator those 2 years.
And so
they were ranked for 17 straight weeks, and he was the D coordinator.
Yeah, I don't like when we just pile on a guy and dismiss him. And it's like, well, now wait a second. He was in on everything that was good. He was in on.
And people felt like, well, they slide the last end of last season. Well, guess what? They lost five of their top 6 linebackers last year, half their secondary, and then this year they've lost 4 of their top 6 linebackers again.
Oh, and by the way, they also played Baylor, Oregon, Notre Dame, Arkansas, Stanford, 5 P5s at Boise State.
Right.
And Utah State was the league champion last year. We didn't know they were going to crumble.
Boise State's as good as more than they'd be in the top third of P5 programs in the country this year.
Yeah. And you know what's strange too?
And Liberty was on a roll when they played them, and East Carolina was on the roll when they played them. This is the toughest schedule. I think this schedule shaped up to be the toughest one BYU's played.
And let's say this. This is funny how the game goes. And I'm all for change, and I think this is a good change.
Yeah.
But if Jaron Hall doesn't get his shoulder injured at the end of the Utah State game, they don't go 0 for 4 in October, and we're not even having this conversation.
Right.
It's got nothing to do with whatever the defense did. It has everything to do with something that an offensive guy did on the field when the defense was on the sideline.
Right.
And that's
short fields and all that. And but they're gonna make some changes as they go into the Big 12, and I just caution people to be a little bit careful, because I read, like, every once in a while somebody will show me a tweet or something about somebody that just really almost angry. Oh, great, it's about to, and I'm going, have you been in the meetings over there?
No.
Do you know what, like, and people act so opinionated and so negative about it. As you mentioned, he had a phenomenal run here, and maybe we'll love the style that they go with now, because I do believe, and we'll talk about this in just a minute, that it's going to be Kalani run for a while. But this is the same tone, and I remember, I'm going way back, and you remember it too, Dave. Norm Chow is awful.
Right.
He needs to be out of here.
He's the worst person.
The game's passed him by. I mean, I was listening to people, and I kept telling people, you need to stop saying that, because first of all, it's blatantly false. Why all of a sudden is everybody on Norm Chow? Well, we had a little bit of a talent issue for a couple of years, and so what does Norm do? He's like, okay, you know what? I'm sick and tired of this fan base just telling me how crappy I am. I'm out. I'll just go to USC and win 2 national championships and coach a bunch of Heisman Trophy winners, and then I'll go be the offensive coordinator for the Tennessee Titans. And when I'm done, I'm going to be recognized as one of the greatest minds, offensive minds, in the history of college football. And BYU fans basically ran him out on a rail.
Yeah.
I remember it. I remember it well. You remember those days.
He called most of the plays in Lavelle's glory years.
Yeah.
Most of them. And in years when he had a really good quarterback, he won the Heisman Trophy.
Yeah.
And in years where he had a quarterback that wasn't great, all right, we were 8-4.
Yeah, people were freaking out. And guess what? And at those USC, like, a couple of those USC teams, you can make an argument are the best teams in the history of college football, and he was running that offense, right? So it's like you just got to be careful.
And you can have opinions, that's okay, and all that stuff. You got to be careful
with how angry and how negative you are about people. And I think it's like he's moving on, and we may love the direction they take, and that'll be great. What I'm saying is, when somebody's put in all those years and the hours, because these guys go in at 6:30 in the morning and get home at 10 o'clock at night, all football season long. Then they go on the road and recruit in the hall in the offseason. I think it's time to say, hey, thanks for the amazing job that you did, and all of the time you committed to this program and to these kids, and the effect that you've had on kids, and say good luck to you. Because I got news for you. He's got some really, really good friends in the business, and Elisa Tuyaki's going to go off and maybe be a D-line coach at a P5 school, and probably be really, really good and come back to haunt us and coach against us at some point. So I think you always wish people well. And
if the $5 booster is the one making all the noise, the $5 booster.
Right.
The multi-million-dollar booster, they're not on Twitter going, this guy's an idiot, we should fire him, I can't. They don't do that. They may make a phone call and have some visits and
say,
hey,
what's going
how
on?
Can we do this? How can I? But it's the $5 booster that's like, gnashing of teeth and all that. That's so stupid.
Well, remember Kyle Whittingham? Like, I don't know. It's every fan base. So
yeah,
they were ready to run Kyle out on a rail a few years ago, and Utah's the best. Like, hey, I hate to even say these words, but Utah's by far the best program in the Pac-12 in the last decade. By far. They've been in 4 of the last 5 Pac-12 championship games.
And he's a good coach. He's a great coach.
But people over time, when they've had a little bit of a down year, act like he's never going to stand up to Urban. Like, he's been better than Urban Meyer at Utah. Now, Urban's been great in other places, but he seems to go build a team, win a national championship, and then leave them in shambles.
I was interviewing Kyle one time for a Father's Day piece on KSL TV, and we finished up. And we were walking around. He was showing around the offices, and you know, it was great. It was a fun visit, and our dads knew each other when at BYU back in the day, and both had passed, so we had a lot in common. And I just looked at him. I said, "You know what we are, Kyle? We're just 2 BYU guys who happen to have jobs in Salt Lake City."
Yeah, that's right.
I don't think he thought that was as funny as I did.
I love it. So, but you know, and it seems like it's always that way, that when your team has a little bit of a downturn, we're not patient, and we start to calling for people's heads, but when something changes like this, I think what we all need to do is take the high road and go, hey, Elisa's stepped down. He's moving on.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for being all of the because amazing contributions, and your phenomenal record while you were here of 28-9 and that great run. We're grateful to you for every minute that you put in. Now we wish you well.
Yeah.
And I see some tweets out there, not a lot. I realize I'm talking to the minority here because most people are exactly what we're talking about. But there's some people out there that are just like, oh, good, now I'm gonna grind him into the ground, tell him how much he stunk while he was here.
Seriously.
That stuff is lost on me. So, but now what happens? Now that Elisa, who's the D coordinator, has stepped down,
there's going to be others.
Yeah.
There will be others.
Because Kalani now, when your coordinator steps down, now you're evaluating the whole defensive side of the ball, right? Now you're going, okay, how am I going to structure this thing moving forward? Am I going to still be in charge as the head coach and bring some younger people in around me, or maybe a more veteran person that I can use as a sounding board, but I'm still in charge? Or am I going to go find a big name person and bring them in and just turn it over to them? And if I do that, do I give them carte blanche of who they bring in with them and have decision-making over the position coaches? I mean, there's a lot that's going to happen now in the coming weeks. And, I mean, I have an opinion on what I think he should do.
Yes.
So
go ahead.
I'm just going to use an example. And most of these are...
See, on our show, we can give our own opinions.
This is my opinion. Kalani's one of the best defensive coordinators I've ever seen in the game. He was recognized as the best defensive coordinator in the Pac-12 for a long time. So P5 defensive coordinator. He got the Oregon State job and went up there, and then got the BYU job because of his reputation as being one of the best defensive minds in college football, right? Yeah. And hey, let's give Kyle Whittingham credit. Kyle took him under his arm and said, this is my guy. I'm going to make him a mirror image of me. I'm going to teach him everything I know about defensive football, but I'm going to keep control of it until I know that he's a mirror image of me. And then when Kalani was a mirror image, he turned it over to him, right? You know, Gary the same way, and all those guys. That's kind of been. And now if you look at what Kyle's done, he took Morgan and said, hey, he's going to be, this is the next guy that I'm going to bring up, and I'm going to be really, really involved, and it's going to be my defense until I know that Morgan Scally is a direct mirror image of me, and then I'll give it to Morgan, right? And now Morgan's had it, and Morgan's recognized as one of the top 10 defensive coordinators in college football, right? Yeah. And probably the next head coach at Utah. I've watched that with Mike Holmgren. I've watched it with Andy Reid. Did Andy Reid hire Eric Bieniemy out of Colorado and say, hey, dude, call the plays? Or did Andy go, I'm the greatest offensive mind in football, period?
He may not have said it, but he is.
He is, right?
Right.
So why in the world would I hire Eric Bieniemy and give him the offense to call the plays until I am certain that he thinks exactly like I think, which is what, last year?
Yeah.
And so for how many years did Andy have charge of that offense and call those plays while Eric was right there by his side? And he said, this is how we think this way, until he was certain that Eric thought exactly like he thought and said, you know what, now I can turn it over to him with some of my input, but I'm not giving up what I'm best at. What about Sean McVay? Hey, did Lincoln Riley, you know, when he took the Oklahoma job, say, you know what? Now that I'm the head coach of Oklahoma, I'm going to bring in an offense coordinator. No, Lincoln's going, no, I'm brilliant on offense. That's what I'm great at. I can be the head coach and run the offense.
And that's what I'm getting paid to do.
Right. So now he's at USC. Did he immediately go, well, now I'm at USC. I've got all these dollars. I can go get a veteran coordinator that can do. Why in the world would he do that? Lincoln Riley is one of the brightest offensive minds in the game, right? So he's calling. Do you think Mike Leach is not, when he took over wherever he's been, whether it's Washington State or whatever, he brings. So I guess the point, and I realize that those are a lot of offensive guys examples, but there's the same on the defensive side, right? My feeling is there are some really good guys out there that Kalani could bring in, but Kalani needs to bring in somebody that doesn't think that they need to come in here and go, well, you know what? I am a defense coordinator, and I know what I'm doing, and my defense is what we're running, and this is what we're doing. It would be different if Kalani was an offensive coach his whole career and was bringing a D coordinator. Right. That's what he needs on offense. Kalani needs somebody on offense to just go with it.
It's what Gary Croton did when he hired Bronco.
Right. Bronco come run. But Kalani's the defensive wizard.
Yeah.
And he took it over the last. I think Kalani gave it up too soon. I think he should have taken Elisa under his wing. He should have said, listen, you're the run game coordinator, you're the D coordinator, but I'm calling the defense, and I'm going to do exactly what Kyle did with Morgan, and maybe we wouldn't be having the conversation. But I think he has a chance to do that now with whoever he brings in. There's some names I love. Like I love Frank Maile. I love Sean Nua. There's Papinga. There's so many guys out there that I think that would be willing to come in under that type of an arrangement where they go, I'm going to teach you everything I know, but I'm in charge of this, and I'm not going to turn it over until you're a mirror image of me. But there's some guys that wouldn't do that. And I hear people going, well, now we have P5 money. We'll go get out and get an established defensive coordinator that has a reputation and all that. I'm like, well, we have one. He's the head coach. Yeah. And the head coach needs to have his influence. And I think you need to get back to that. That's my personal opinion. And the great coaches that I've worked with, the Mike Holmgren and Andy Reid and these guys, that's the way they did it. So I like that system. Kyle was my roommate in college. As much as he's up at the U and we're BYU, I respect what Kyle's done, and that's the way Kyle's done it through and through. Yep. And you watch, if Morgan gets that head job, he's probably going to take Sharif Shah and make him his D coordinator, and he's going to say, but I'm going to call it until you're a mirror image of me.
Yeah, it's all good points.
So there's my philosophy in a nutshell.
So what's your
thought on that?
Well, what I would do is I agree with all that. So I'm going to leave that as is. Then I would walk down to the hall into Aaron Roderick's office, and I'd say, Aaron, you and the offensive staff, we got to score more points.
Yep.
Defense, I'm going to do all this to fix the defense, but going into the Big 12, 35 points is not going to be enough.
Right. You got to score 40 plus a game in that league.
And so you guys got to figure that out. And if you have to make some changes, we'll make some changes there too.
Right. I think you're right. I think he has to say, I'm going to focus on this, which I probably should have, and I have to trust you on this. But you have to have enough leadership to say, okay, Kalani, if the charge is to score 40 plus a game, we need to get better here and here and here, and this is the staff I need around me, and I know we have the money, so this is what I need. These are the resources I need. And then Kalani goes and fights and gets those resources for him and tells him, now you got to get the job done, because I'm going to take responsibility for the defense over here, and we're going to get it done. And getting it done in the Big 12 is different getting it done in the past, right?
Yeah.
Like this, hey, you got to hold teams under 20 points a game. I promise you if you're a really good D coordinator, that's not happening.
That is not. No, just go look at the scores.
Yeah. TCU's the number 3 team in the country. I'd have to look at what their per game is, but they win some games 50-something to 38.
Yeah. That's just how it goes, and that's how it's going to go.
Yep.
And so it'll be interesting to see in the next few days.
USC's not holding people to 20 points a game.
No.
And they're the number 4 team in the country.
They're not going to hold the Utes to 20 points on Friday, but they can score 50.
There's one team in the country, maybe 1.5 teams in the country, but there's one team in the country that just shuts people down like nobody else, and that's Georgia. Yeah. Outside of Georgia, who plays like that anymore? I mean, even Ohio State goes out and outscores people. Now, I do feel
and Michigan puts the hurt on them.
And I feel like Michigan Jim's tried to build that thing to be that way, but you just look at when they play good teams, that Michigan-Ohio State game, they go out and outscore people. Yeah. You got to outscore people.
speaking of outscoring people, and we'll keep an eye on all the football stuff, and it's going to be an interesting coming few days and weeks leading up to the bowl game. The BYU basketball team was down in the Bahamas on Friday in a game kind of lost in the holiday because everything's going on and people are shopping and there's football and all that stuff. But they fall behind to Dayton 32-9 in the first half. Mm-hmm. I'm watching it, and I'm sitting there going, well, now I'm going to watch just to see how bad it's going to get, because sometimes you
it was like coming across an accident. I'm going to stop and look at this.
Does anybody need any help? And then they turn it around after halftime. They shoot 57% from the field. They limit turnovers to a season low. They come all the way back from 23 down, and they beat Dayton in overtime. And I'm watching this, and I'm thinking, we've seen this movie before. You go back to the 2012 NCAA tournament. BYU's down 25 points to Iona, and they come back and win. That's tied for the largest comeback in the history of the Big Dance. And then here we are in 2022, rallying from 23 down against a team that's pretty good, Dayton.
Oh, yeah. Dayton is always in the top of the Atlantic 10.
Yeah.
In fact, a couple years ago, everybody thought they were a Final Four team. That's how good a program that is.
So then the question is, did they turn the corner? And we'll see that with their games Tuesday and Saturday, right, and then Utah Valley next week before they play Creighton in Vegas on December 10th. Was this the springboard to better days, or was it just a wild second half?
We hope. I looked out there to see. I looked really, really hard on the screen to see if I could see some light bulbs coming on, because I was hoping that was the minute the light bulb came on. And the two things that we've wanted to see them clean up, and the two things that Mark Pope told us were going to be issues early, were turnovers, which I feel like in that tournament they did a much better job. You know, you mentioned in that Butler game they lost by 5. But they held to 13 turnovers. I think 12 is a good number for them.
And the USC game was helter-skelter, and they still could have won that
right. And remember, there were games early on when you and I were calling where they had 20, 21, 22, 23 turnovers, which is not good. So in that Dayton game, even though they got down, they only had 11 turnovers. So I'm like, oh, you know what? I think they've figured out how to play at this pace and take care of the ball better. So that's huge. That was thing number one. I feel like the light bulb did come. I could see the light bulbs on that one. These little shooting woes where they get in a rush to shoot the basketball and they have these spans of time where it's just like they can't make a shot, and then they get down. In the second half, I love the way it felt like they took their time and stayed fundamentally sound and shot the basketball. And they got a lot more shots at the rim.
Jackson Robinson's a good shooter. Gideon George's a good shooter when they just give themselves one more second.
It's like even a half a second to get yourself set, square up, and stay with your fundamentals, right? And so that had been missing. We absolutely saw it in the second half of the Dayton game, and what a difference. So in that second half, they took care of the ball, and they shot the basketball consistently.
And they rebounded.
And they rebounded. And they've been rebounding pretty well all year. So we're going to see. Tonight, and Saturday, and I realize the competition's not the same, but we can still see how they shoot the basketball.
How they run their plays.
I'm expect the goals are 12 turnovers or less in both of these games, and then shoot the basketball. I'd like to see them be 45% plus from the field, and I'd like to see them be 38% plus as a team from three in these games. And if they can do that in both of these games, I'd love it if they were 40 plus from three. If they can do that in these two games, then maybe I'm going to see some light bulbs on the shooting side too.
We will see you for all three of those games coming up on BYU TV. Women's volleyball, they're a 7 seed in the NCAA tournament. They're going to play against James Madison in Pittsburgh on Friday afternoon. If they win, they'll take on either Colgate or the host team, Pittsburgh, on Saturday. Pitt beat BYU 3-1 at the Smith Fieldhouse early in September when they were number 10 and BYU was number 7. So that's the BYU should win on Friday, and then you've got Pittsburgh on their home floor. That's going to be tough, but this is a volleyball program that makes going to the Sweet 16.
That's just what they do.
Just what they do.
Yeah, and how about Heather Olmstead? Her career record now 212 and 28. 88.3%.
That is crazy.
That's the highest winning percentage of any women's volleyball coach in NCAA Division I history. So she knows what she's doing.
She knows what she's doing, and
they're always a threat to bring it together because they have talent and they're young.
Yeah, young team.
But hey, who knows? They could get that at Pitt, and we'll see how it goes from there. Get it on a roll.
Men's volleyball gets going in January. We'll get Sean Olmstead in here and visit with him about it. Hey, coming up next week, our guests will include Glenn Kozlowski. outstanding BYU receiver, star in the Michigan game that locked up the national championship. Cubs pitcher Michael Rucker had a great year with Chicago. Big-time BYU product. He's going to join us live. And then we'll visit with Scott Robinson. He's the promoter of the BYU Creighton game, which is December 10th.
Down in Vegas.
Mandalay Bay.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that. Mark Durant's going to come in studio December 13th.
Excited for that because he's going to rebut everything that Devin Durant
absolutely.
said.
We'll get some questions from Devin. Yeah. Mark is the analyst on BYU Radio. And then you and I together on the 20th because we've got a basketball game.
Very similar to
night.
This one today.
And then we're working with Danny Ainge to get him later in the month.
Trying to get him at the end of the month if we can. So we hope that you watched After Further Review just before this.
Can you believe it was our last show of the season?
I know. You could have had a triple header tonight. After Further Review, this show, and then the basketball game with us. So we hope you did that.
It's a lot of us.
We hope you joined us for all three. And then our football picks.
Yeah, should we do them?
Let's do them real quick.
By the way, I had a good week last week, and you did not, so we'll just move right into these games.
I'm not ashamed. I just vote with my heart. So.
All right, Utah and USC Friday night in the Pac-12 Championship in Las Vegas. I think you know I'm going USC.
And sometimes I go for Utah. Not this time. USC's on a roll. I think USC wins by 10 or more.
Michigan and Purdue in the biggest letdown Big Ten championship game ever after the Michigan-Ohio State game. They got to go down to play
Last
Purdue.
week was the Big Ten championship game, and I'm going to take Michigan to win this second Big Ten championship game.
I'll be stunned if Ohio State doesn't find their way into the college football playoff.
If USC wins and beats Utah, I think they're in. And I think if TCU doesn't, I think it's set. If nobody loses,
would you take a one-loss USC over a one-loss Ohio State? And the Ohio State's loss is to Michigan.
If USC beats Ohio State or beats Utah in good fashion. So in other words, they win by 2 touchdowns.
You think they're in, huh?
Yep, I think they're in because they want the Pac-12 in there.
Yeah, or at least they want USC in there. I don't think they care about.
Yeah, they want USC in there.
And USC's going to the Big Ten. Ironic that they finally got their house together just in time to leave. TCU and Kansas State in the Big 12 championship.
It's a great game. I'm going to take TCU because I think they're going to score like 50.
That would really mess up the playoff if
they lost.
Kansas State beat TCU.
And then they're number 3 right now.
LSU, who just I'm just going to put your pick there.
Yeah,
LSU, Georgia's going there. Clemson and North Carolina. This is now an interesting one. Both coming off losses.
Yeah, I'm gonna still go with Clemson in the big game because they know how to win. In the ACC.
I think I'll go Clemson too. Fresno State and Boise State.
I'm taking Boise State. I think they're dominating right now.
Central Florida and Tulane.
This is a tough one. I'm going to take Tulane.
This could be the winner. Could be the New Year's Six game.
Right. And Tulane, I feel like is just playing so confidently on offense. I'm going to take Tulane.
Yeah, I think so too. North Texas and UTSA. Now, why would we pick this one? Because UTSA is projected as a potential opponent for BYU.
And I think UTSA is going to win that Conference USA championship.
Okay. Cougars in the NFL on Sunday. Steelers at the Falcons. Tyler Algier continues to motor along.
And Jags at the Lions. Jamal Williams, 13 touchdowns. He just needs 3 to tie Barry Sanders for the Lions record. He leads the NFL in touchdowns for running back.
Are you kidding me right now? We're talking about Barry Sanders and Jamal in the same sentence.
Unbelievable.
So Barry's got 16 regular season touchdowns. That's the Lions record. And here comes Jamal. He needs 3 more over the next 4 or 5 games. He can get that.
Yep. How about the Jets? Zach Wilson at the Vikings, but is Zach going to play?
No, he's not. Unless White gets hurt.
You know what I hope?
What do you hope?
I hope exactly because the Jets don't deserve Zach Wilson because their fans are idiots. Everybody knows that, right? I grew up there.
Yeah.
So that's why I was a Giants fan. They forget that Josh Allen had the lowest completion percentage in the NFL for 2 seasons. The guy's and Steve Young was at Tampa when they weren't good. And he got out of Tampa and went to San Francisco. Let's hope that Zach gets out of the Jets and goes to San Francisco and wins some world championships. That would be a nice path to follow.
Dax Milne, the Commanders at the Giants. Sione Takitaki and the Browns at the Texans. Fred Warner is hosting the Dolphins.
Awesome.
That's going to be an interesting matchup with their defense and the Dolphins' offense.
And then the Chargers, Kyle Van Noy and Michael Davis at the Raiders. Those guys have been representing all year. So.
All right, final 2 minutes tonight. Here's this day in history. A couple of interesting things.
1877, Thomas Edison demonstrates his hand-cranked phonograph for the first time. How about that?
Now we all have songs on our iPhones.
Yep, it's on my phone.
First Army-Navy football game on this day in 1890. Navy wins 24-0. They'll meet 2 weeks from now, the annual Army-Navy game, and we wish Ken Niumatalolo the very best in that one.
1910, the first U.S. patent for inventing the traffic light system is issued to Ernest Serine.
Tired of those red lights? Blame Ernest.
Yeah. In Vegas, they're the longest lights ever.
Oh, yeah. The Beatles release I Want to Hold Your Hand in 1963 in the United Kingdom. How about this next one?
Hey, 1987, Joe Montana set the NFL record with 22 consecutive pass completions.
22. Against professionals.
Yeah.
2009, Montreal beat Saskatchewan on a last-second field goal to win the Grey Cup, 28-27. Why do we care? And the kicker actually missed his first attempt, but Saskatchewan was penalized for having too many men on the field, so they got to kick it again. He made the 33-yarder. Last week's guest, Ben Cahoon, caught a touchdown in that game and won the most outstanding Canadian award for his performance.
Awesome. That is awesome.
All right, quick birthdays.
Yep, C.S. Lewis.
I love that quote.
1989, his quote, "You can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending."
1889.
From one of the greatest writers ever.
C.S. Lewis. 1927, Vin Scully.
1889, right?
Yeah.
1969, Mariano Rivera, the Yankees closer. Scary.
1976, Chadwick Boseman, the Black Panther.
Here we go.
Who's since passed away.
Deaths, 1981, Natalie Wood, the star of Miracle on 34th Street.
Cary Grant, 1986.
And 2001, George Harrison of the Beatles.
Our Lavelle quote to get us out on the day that the coach passed away, December 29th, 2016. Gil Brandt, longtime vice president of player personnel with the Dallas Cowboys and friend of the program, declared this in a tweet.
He said, "Lavelle Edwards was the loyalist coach I ever met. Had lucrative offers elsewhere, but stayed at BYU. Never moved from first Provo house he bought," which is so true. Patty's still there today.
29 seasons. He won 257 games, national championship, 10 straight WAC championships, had a run of 17 consecutive bowl games, and in 2004 inducted into the National Football Foundation and College Football Hall of Fame, the great Lavelle Edwards. Next week, Glenn Kozlowski and Cubs pitcher Michael Rucker. We look forward to that. We look forward to Thursday if the schedule comes out for the Big 12. Watch for us here and our tweets and all of that stuff, and we'll keep you posted as Wise Guys rolls into a new week.
Amen.
For Blaine Fowler, I'm Dave McCann. We're the Wise Guys, wiseguys.com, YouTube, Twitch, wherever we're at in the community. Just say hello, and we're so glad that you watch and you listen. Thanks again. Have a great week.